What are the typical things that you learned that Canadians like and do not like to consume?
It's a hard question because when you ask that question, the first thing I think of is the answer is different depending on which consumer category you're studying. The people who do food research will tell you that the taste profiles of Canadians is distinctly different than the preferred taste profiles of their of Americans, right? So Americans tend to prefer sweeter things than Canadians.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Right?
Yeah.
And so if you're marketing a food product, there is a potential challenge that you may not necessarily have the right taste profile when you go from one country to another, right? And so that begs the whole question is like, what's a Canadian? And in fact, if you look at a macro level, the fabric of Canadian society over the last 25 years or 30 years has changed quite dramatically, right? So when I started my career 30 years ago or so, and even a little bit before that, Canada, if you go back to like the 1950s and 60s and you looked at the pattern of immigration, Canada its growth at the time was driven by immigration primarily from Western Europe. You fast forward to 1980 to 1990 and on, and you start to look at the pattern of Canadian society driven by immigration. It's a very different looking Canada, right? Yeah. Where in 1950, Canada was primarily white and Caucasian in nature. Now there's demographers talk about the browning of Canadian society, right? Because the fabric of society is coming from China, they're coming from India, they're coming from the Philippines. Why is that important? And I'll get back to the question about what's a Canadian. Well, and how are they different? Well, it's a great answer because what's happening is last year Canada admitted 1 million new Canadians, primarily from Asia and South Asia. These new immigrants are bringing their culture with them, their preferred taste profiles, their preferred consumer products. And there's this change in terms of what's a Canadian. Well, it's actually a lot of little different things, and which is causing, and I think we're at this inflection point, particularly among marketers in Canada, where they're starting to realize that there's a very significant proportion of the traditional Canadian fabric, the preconceived Caucasian is not really your average Canadian anymore. Answering what is a Canadian is actually very, very challenging because I think that the answer depends, what's your consumer category, what's your target market, and where do they come from, and what is their upbringing? It's a very tough question to answer.